So we've got a little bit of a special episode today. Todd and I are going to be talking about publishing. And I want to start with a question for Todd. So Todd, why did you want to publish a book? What did you think it would solve in your life?
I never wanted to publish a book.
No?
No. This is what happened. Early in my sales career, I was at a sales seminar. And at all these sales seminars, they always have speakers that come as guests, right? And then there was the keynote speaker, right? Now, I was with my boss, and when I found out what this speaker made, who wasn't very good, wasn't very interesting, wasn't very funny, he made more in an hour, Joe, than I made in 2 months. And I said right then, I want to do what he does.
Okay.
So I signed up with Toastmasters to start learning how to public speak. And I bought this book called Speak and Grow Rich. How corny is that? Would you buy it? That's like the overnight success kind of thing.
That almost sounds like a for dummies book, except for focused on money.
This was like pre-internet too.
Oh, okay.
So stuff was very old school, you know. So this is what the first chapter of the book said. If you write a book, you become an instant expert.
Okay.
So that's how you separate yourself from the herd. So if you take 100 doctors, right, and then 2 of them wrote books, they're also doctor authors. So they're going to be more desirable for those well-paying speaking gigs.
Gotcha. So a book was like something you could stand on. It would put you that much higher than the rest of the crowd.
So your original question, what would this solve in my life? I thought I was going to be rich, drugs and tigers money.
Okay.
It was going to solve my poverty issue.
So from all of the not seeing drugs or tigers on your front table, I'm guessing that didn't really happen with the book?
No, and by the way, I've learned through the years that there's no such thing as an instant expert. Time takes time to get good at absolutely everything.
Gotcha. Okay. So can I admit to having dabbled with publishing a bit myself?
Why contest instead of directly to publishing?
For those that listen to The Re-Engineered You, Todd will sometimes call me an award-winning author. That is not completely true. He's being very polite. I have some contest awards from a couple of minor national contests and honorable mentions from a couple of international contests. So nothing earth-shatteringly big. But I went into contests because so Todd looked at publishing the way the older generation looks at it, which is it's something you do to raise your career. You stand on a book and it puts you above the rest of the crowd. You're 3 inches taller than everybody in your field.
Shameless self-promotion.
Basically, yes. One could look at it like that. I went at it from the younger generation's perspective, which is I grew up knowing that self-publishing was an ocean, and that when you drop your book into that ocean, it just makes a little plop, and then nobody pays attention. And the way to try to overcome that is to prove. You prove it first. You go to contests, and you send things into contests until you win something really big, and then you can start submitting to agents and editors.
Well, let me tell you something about self-publishing, too. We have a joke, anyone who's self-published a book, and we say, I'm an Amazon bestseller, because we're all Amazon bestsellers. I was such a cornball, too, trying to be famous. I even made because you can put a name of your publisher on it, I even tried to make it sound like a big publishing house.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that? I guess Evel Knievel would be proud of me.
That's right. Evil would be 100% on board. Before we get into the intro, could you happen to tell us what that publishing house you made up was?
It was Seattle something. It was a pretty clever name. I can't remember. It was Seattle Publishing Company or something. So it sounded like a smaller local
Okay.
I mean, I thought about this a lot. I thought more about that than what the content of my book.
Oh, my God. Well, that's a perfect intro. Today's episode is brought to you by the Seattle publishing company, Todd Inc.
Don't Google them. Nothing's going to pop up. Yeah, me, right?
Right.
You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-dawn on the internet and get to the facts.
In today's world of self-promotion, self-actualization, and self-mythologizing, everyone has a book out. And if you don't have a book, other professionals might assume you don't have a real message. Well, today, we're talking about that message. Or, more specifically, we're talking about how to publish that message. It's safe to say our own publishing history is a bit odd. We're not publicists here at The Re-Engineered You. But Joe and I have stumbled into the same tiger pit on our way to the printing press. And on today's episode, we're going to point it out for you so you can avoid taking the same tumble. And to get us started, we have 3 myths to dispel about publishing your first book. Myth 1. Writing is simple. You write an interesting story, you sell it, and you reap the royalties. Why pretend the state of publishing is any more complicated? Myth 2. Okay, already written my book, and it's a scorcher. If I don't want to go through the rejection process with a publishing house, surely I can just hire someone to edit and print the thing. Myth 3. So my first book didn't rake in the royalties and prestige I thought it might. What if I want to try again? What market or genre should I be writing in if I want to improve my odds? But first, I want to tell Joe about another small-time writer who couldn't seem to get his first book off the ground, a barely known author by the name of Stephen King.
So we have talked Stephen King on this podcast before, specifically our alcoholism episode. What are we learning from Mr. King today?
We're not going down into his cocaine use and alcoholism.
Oh, okay.
We're giving him a day off. But what we are talking about is his rejection that he's placed as an author. Now, we know he's one of the best-selling authors of all time, whether you like his stuff or not.
He's got a lot of books out.
Okay, I'm going to read a quote from Stephen King. By the time I was 14, the nail in the wall would no longer support the weight of the rejection slips impaled upon it. I placed the nail with a spike and went on writing.
So it's a good sign when your protruding bit of metal that you're collecting rejections on eventually droops and you have to replace it with like a railroad spike or something.
And we know that paper isn't that heavy, so.
Right. He must have had like a dictionary up there basically by the time he had those rejections.
How did you relate to this? What's your experience on this?
I have far less rejections because I have submitted to far less sources. But my e-rejections list, I don't have a nail, but I do have a spreadsheet open, and it is getting quite a lot of entries. It looks like I'm collecting data for a major firm.
Well, we'll talk about Stephen King's first book. It was Carrie, and it was rejected by 30 publishers. And one of the letters came back and said this: "We are not interested in science fiction, which deals with negative utopias. They do not sell." It was finally published in 1974. When the paperback version was released, a year later, we're talking about Carrie, it sold over 1 million copies in only 12 months.
So first rejected by 30 publishers, and those are 30 publishers who are now tearing out their hair.
Exactly. Now, this next part I want to talk about, because I am a big Stephen King fan. I grew up in Maine. My mom actually taught school at the same school that he taught at.
No way.
So she heard stories about what he was like. And you know what everyone said about him?
What's that?
He was really weird.
I can see that. I mean,
what would you think?
His demeanor, right? and the guy writes such crazy dark stuff.
I could just see him in the in the teacher's lounge, just not talking to anybody, just reading his book.
Yeah.
Right? Now, one of my favorite books of all time, my favorite nonfiction books, is Stephen King on writing. Have you read that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a great book and a fantastic resource. Like he doesn't just talk writing, he talks like strategy and writing tactic. It's really good.
I enjoyed just the biography side of it.
Right, him talking about his journey and how he became a writer.
It's very inspiring. Now, he lived in rural Maine. So on this Cary front, this is from the book Stephen King on writing. He lived like on the back of someone's property in like a trailer.
Okay.
They didn't have a phone. And back then, school teachers in Maine made about $12,000 a year, which wasn't a lot of money even back then.
Right.
So he had a phone call. He called his publisher. You know, it's not like nowadays where you went on the internet, you check your book sales.
Mm-hmm.
And he found out there was a $300,000 check waiting for him in the early 70s.
That is a hell of a way to check your pockets and find a couple of bills lying around.
Honey, we're moving.
Right, we're getting out of the trailer. So knowing that Stephen King went traditional publishing, meaning he got those rejections and he submitted to major publishing houses until one of them finally accepted something of his, would you have been better off going with traditional publishing, Todd?
Well, for starters, I want to talk about comparing my writing to Joe's. This is not realistic. He is a professional writer. I'm in Little League. He's in the major leagues. He's in another universe compared to me. And he has won a national contest. He said he had, and he said he'd placed, but he won Willamette Writers, which is a huge contest.
I got second place back in 2014.
And usually when you win those kind of, or even place second, a book deal's not far behind it.
Yes. I will share that I showed up to the contest and I should have had something ready to sell, and I didn't. I thought I was showing up to brag.
You want to go into that a little deeper?
Sure. I did not understand this the year that I placed, but contests are basically a way to sort out who has the chops to get into publishing, who could actually submit something and finish a story, and who is basically just writing to say they've written, to put something on a self-published book. When I showed up, I was in like a polo shirt and like, Dockers, and everybody else was in a tuxedo, basically.
That must have been uncomfortable.
It was. The first stop I made was at the bar for a shot of whiskey because I was very nervous. And they immediately, people who were in editing and, partially in publishing started approaching me and asking what I had written, because they gave us name tags that said like winner in big green letters for the people who had placed. And people were asking what I had done. And I really should have showed up ready to sell a book. So I almost comically did the opposite that you did. You went into publishing with a book ready to roll, and then you published it yourself. I went into publishing without anything ready to sell. I had just written some short stories that seemed, they did well.
But there was an opportunity there. So if you had been prepared for it, and you didn't know, you were new at this.
Exactly.
You could have handed that over and probably had a book deal. I do like the part of the story that you felt kind of a little socially awkward, and then what did you do to take action to improve that?
I had been going to Toastmasters for about a year by then, so I started asking people. We sat at big round tables, and they were asking what we had written, and I turned the question back on the table. I asked everybody, I just wrote something I had researched a lot, and I said, hey, everybody, what's the strangest thing you've ever done for book research? And people started like laughing. Like immediately somebody was like, I blinded myself with a blindfold for a week so I could write about being blind. And then somebody was saying that they went hunting for bog iron, and so they were hip deep in mud looking for iron. And so everybody had a story, and it was really easy to Toastmaster, to table topics, the whole thing, to get everybody to give a little speech and talk about what they were doing.
Now, do you think when these people came up and talked to you, these editors and publishers, do you think that they're filling you out too to see, is this someone that's going to promote the book? Is this someone who can go out and represent their book well and get it to sell?
100%. And we're going to talk about how much of the pie, how much of the sales come from the author nowadays, because that's a major component to When we talk about a successful author, that as soon as you write your book, you're rich and famous, not anymore. Publishing, even the biggest publishers, like big names, big authors, they're doing a lot of their own sales nowadays.
Well, you talked about where you fell a little bit short. I want to tell you what I did. I would not go self-publish before, and I'll tell you why. Today, what I would do, and I give advice to a younger Todd, is I would work on a specific skill or a set of skills that's real nichey. You know what an expert is? Someone who knows a lot about a little.
Right.
And they're very valuable. And I'd spend less time just being so generic, less time trying to be famous or appearing famous, and give real value to my readers.
I think that is a really good message.
Less stories about me. I'm not that interested. And the only people that are going to buy that book is me and my mom. Now, another thing I would have done, now, which I am doing now, is I would team up with experts to make me my best self. That's what I'm doing right here with Joe.
Excellent.
Now, I do know some people who are published authors, and what I've heard from them is traditional publishing has an advantage that you don't have with self-publishing, like Amazon stuff. They have an investment in you, even if they didn't give you a big check. That's a lot of money to print out a book. So they have proven marketing strategies. So they have a structure that you can use to sell your book. Okay,
so instead of me putting out my own ebook and then just ad hoc throwing money at marketing at random, they have a plan.
That's worked before. Structure. Now, I'm going to throw this off you, and this is what I've come from my study. Even if you're the most awesome writer, you're brilliant, you're talented, that does not mean you're going to get a monster check from the publisher. They save those for established writers who have proven to sell a certain amount of books. And some amazing writers don't sell anything. And some less than amazing writers sell millions.
Right. Just to sort of give everyone a little bit of an idea of the numbers Todd is talking about, I won't say the publishing house, but the top few fantasy houses, when they sell a fantasy book for the first time, doesn't matter if you're an amazing author or a generic author, it's like about $5,000 for your first book.
So it's not the 2.2 that we dream of.
No, it's not the millions. You have to put out a couple of books first and establish yourself, and then your paycheck gets higher and higher as you climb that mountain.
And you also have to pay for all the people that didn't make it to all those books. They get a little.
Yeah, they're not paying you for a book. They are gambling on you as an author, which is a little bit different than what we imagine.
Well said. Yeah.
So, do you want to get into sort of the negatives or the pitfalls first of traditional publishing?
Yeah, seriously.
We've kind of already done that a little bit, and I don't want to scare everyone off. Anyone listening to this podcast, if you're thinking we're just going to spend the entire hour poo-pooing the idea of publishing a book, please don't think that. We're going to get into how to do it well and how to promote and how to get your book out there.
Well, I do have to say, the $5,000, a book I spent 2 years on,
right.
You get $5,000. I'm doing the math. I'm thinking, that's not even close to minimum wage.
No. There are actually websites where people have gone and done the math on how long it takes to get good at writing and how many hours it takes to write a book versus how much you get paid for your first couple times out. It is far less than minimum wage. You're basically writing for free for your first few books. And you're building up to a career, or you're using a book to promote your own career on the side. It's a book is a feather in the cap, or it's a stepping stone. It's not its own reward. So we're going to quote things from, this is a article that has been republished, reprinted many, many times. You can find it on lots of blogs. It's called 10 Awful Truths About Publishing. And it's worth looking up. It's a really good article. And these will scare you away from publishing. That is its intent. So we're just going to quote a couple of these or to look at the bullet points. You can look it up yourself. They have numbers. They have where they got their sources from. They're all sourced. That's one of the best parts of this article, that it's been floating around for a while, and they have sources. So number one in their state of publishing, again, they're scary things to drive you away from publishing. the number of books being published every year has exploded. Back in 2019, it says 1.7 million books were self-published in the U.S. So what year did you self-publish, if you don't mind me asking?
2014.
Okay. So you were in the sort of earlier stages where it was like 1 million a year or something like that. In 2019, the total number of books published in the U.S. exceeded 4 million in that year alone. So nowadays, if you're going to put out a book, even if it's regular publishing, not self-published, you're literally competing against 1 million books a quarter.
So we're going from pond to lake to sea to ocean.
Yeah. We're shooting a book out into space at this point with how many there are out there. And it really is because of what we talked about at the top of the episode. Everybody wants to be able to stand on that book and say, I'm an expert. Here's how I did it. The second point on this, we're not going to get to all of these. We just want to hit the major ones. Book sales are stagnant despite the explosion of books published.
Everyone's watching YouTube videos.
Yep. YouTube videos, and we will get into this near the end of the episode, but audiobooks. Those are both getting wildly popular.
And I'm a fan of audiobooks. I am.
Oh, me too. Absolutely. Part of the reason of this, or for this trend, is books, the stores themselves, book and mortar stores, have started declining by about 42%. They peaked in 2007, and they've declined down by about 42%.
Yeah, I remember Walden Books. It used to be in the mall, and then Borders was a huge one.
Isn't it strange that like Borders and the major book, the what do you call it, the franchises have gone away, but the small ma and pa ones have stuck around. Like I see, of course Pals is still around, but I see the small bookstores in Portland still open because they have loyalty. They have people who know them and come in for book recommendations.
Well, let's brag on Pals for a quick minute since we're Portlanders.
Oh, absolutely.
They have a section on absolutely everything.
Yes.
And it's impressive. When you go in there, sometimes it looks like there's so many people. It's like Disneyland.
It is. It's Disneyland for books. For anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, here in Portland, Oregon, we have something called Powell's City of Books, and it is just a massive, it used to be like a department store, and they filled it with books. It's the largest bookstore in the U.S., I believe.
Now, I know you know a lot about Powell's, but I'm going to hit you something you probably don't know, Joe. The people that work, their union who work at Powell's, and they're the exact same union, these people that work at the bookstore at Powell's that help you find whatever you're looking for, your fantasy books, they're the same union as the longshoremen.
No way.
They are. So when there's a a strike or something, they bring in those beer drinking.
Imagine them striking side by side. You've got the longshoremen there holding their signs, and they're just big burly guys, and then like the hipsters from Pals that have the glasses and like the scarves, and that's amazing.
Waving American flag out front.
I want to see that. Now I want to see that. Point 3 for publishing, the current state of publishing. Despite the addition of ebook sales and downloadable audio sales, overall book sales have shrunk as well. We're not going to get too far into that because we cover audio later. But generally speaking, ebook sales fell about 30% from 2013 to 2019. So if you're looking to put your self-published book out on ebook, thinking that's a quick way to get into the market, it's a big market and it's a declining market. Average book sales are shockingly small. We talked about how the houses are buying full novels for less money. On top of that, the average U.S. book is now selling less than 200 copies per year and less than 1,000 copies over its lifetime. So that's an average. Of course, the top of the average is going to be things like Dan Brown or some major seller like that. But the average is going to sell about 1,000 copies. So 1,000 people will have read your book if you land in that average. A book has far less than 1% chance of being stocked in an average bookstore. Again, bookstores are going away. So if you're looking at shelf space, There's maybe 100 to 1,000 other titles competing for that space if you are using a physical book. So you probably are not going to see it in a store. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll get into why that is later. But please don't get into this expecting to be able to like read your book jacket on a store someday.
Well, I always think of that long line of people to sign, you know,
Right.
all of your starstruck fans.
That scene that's in every movie where it's just, yeah, everybody lined up to get an autograph.
It's not really realistic.
It's getting harder. This kind of goes in with the idea that we're sitting behind a table signing for people. It's getting harder and harder to sell new titles every year, meaning there's a reason why you keep seeing sequels to Angels and Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. I mentioned him before. Same with other book sales. You're way more likely to see like the next Harry Potter book and the next Harry Potter spin-off and Harry Potter's second spin-off and prequels and sequels. It's so hard to sell new titles. Most books also, very related to that. Most books today are being sold to the authors and publishers communities, meaning they are not selling to new people necessarily. A lot of times they're selling to their Facebook followers and their Twitter followers and their Instagram followers. So they're selling to communities of people that are already buying their stuff and are following them. So they're basically almost guaranteed sales. And the last one we're going to cover from this article, again, I really encourage people to look this up. Most book marketing today is done by the author, not the publisher. I have heard people quote 50%.
Wow.
Major houses, even like you get a major deal from a house that puts out big books for big authors. They expect even the top authors to make half of their total sales.
Now, the people I've known that they get interviewed by their publisher, the people I've known have been published, and they want to know how many Instagram followers you have, what your YouTube channel is.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, they need to know what your potential sales group is, and they need to know what your social media following is. So, speaking of expecting the author to make half of their own sales or more, I was wondering, what kind of promotion did you do for your book? Were you expected to make all of your sales?
Yeah, and I did 100% of mine. The first step is you want to pre-sell your book. So you want to talk to your friends and family and bug them and make them pre-buy your book. You think, because you read these things that say, okay, if you get the reviews and you sell a certain amount of books, you keep getting up in this tick, and next thing you know, or if you price it at a certain amount, there's all these little tricks they say, and I tried them all, and I don't think they really work.
Okay.
So you do a pre-sale for the book. I did 2 promotional events at 2 colleges in Seattle, and that was fun. I got to meet people. I got to give some little baby speeches. It was fun. I got to meet a lot of professors and stuff. I felt like a big shot.
That's cool. That's a good experience.
So it might be a status raise or something, or an ego raise. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So now you have to bribe all your friends to write reviews for you, Joe.
Oh.
And that's painful.
As an introvert, that sounds like actual torture.
As an extrovert, it's lousy too. Now, I could tell you this, and I don't know if you can share this experience with it or not. You're going to be shocked at who buys your book, and you're going to be shocked at who doesn't. You're going to be disappointed.
Okay.
And it's the same with reviews. The people you thought your friends or family, you knew you could count on to get a 5-star review, just never get around to it.
Gosh, this almost sounds like as a kid having your school do a magazine sale, and you're like going around trying to sell magazines to all of your friends and family.
Exactly. Now, I did have some real good luck promotional wise, and I did sell some books on it. And what I did was I went on a lot of radio shows and podcasts.
Okay.
Now, I want to paint this picture for you. From Maine to Miami, from Houston to San Francisco, right now there's all kinds of radio stations running 24 hours a day. There's podcasts. Well, how many? 5 million podcasts. So you find people who are in your same space, and you say, I want to be a guest on a show. I'm an author. And I was very busy doing those. What you do is you create an email that says what you're about with your picture, a little promotional thing, picture of your book. You tell them what a great guest you are and all these other shows that you've been on. And then you get an audio thing and send it to them. And I was busy. My goal was to be on 2 shows a day.
Okay.
And I made that. I did that for about 6 months. It was exhausting. And I had better luck on the podcast because I was working full time. Obviously, I wasn't making any money on the book. So I had to kind of, that's a long day when you put a 10-hour workday in and 2 shows on.
That's wild.
And I tried to do them around my work schedule, but sometimes, Joe, I would just take off and just be gone. Where's Todd?
Leave work. I'm going to go take lunch break and then promote your book.
Now, you apply to a lot of them, and you get shows that may have 10 listeners, and I've went on the ones that have hundreds of thousands of listeners. When you get on the big shows, the producer always calls you first and gives you an interview.
Okay.
To make sure they're not dealing with a total idiot here.
They either want to make sure you're not going to embarrass them, or they want to make sure you're going to be very, very amusing, right?
But the nice thing is nowadays you can be on the phone or be on Skype, and you can be busy. You can promote yourself if you're willing to do the work.
Okay. So for those that are out there looking to self-publish, that started this episode thinking they're going to pull their book up by its own bootstraps, you can totally do that. You can arrange it like Todd did.
You're going to have to be relentless, and you can't quit like I did.
Okay. So what we're hearing is relentless self-promotion, like most of our episodes. During your big promotional tour, share with us, to make us feel a little bit better about starting this journey, this boulder pushing, what was the highlight? What was the biggest moment for you?
I got a good one, Joe.
Okay.
I had somebody very famous buy my book.
Oh, and
I'm going to give you, I want you to guess who it is, and I'm going to give you some hints. This is somebody everyone in the world knows. Okay? Very, very famous.
Okay.
This is somebody everybody in the world likes. That's a tough one, right? Because most people, they have 50% of the world hates them, 1% likes them, right?
Let's see. Bobby Flay.
Close. It was, she read the book, and she conversated with me on Twitter. Mrs. Brady herself, Florence Henderson.
No way.
Yes. That's when you know you arrived, people, when Mrs. Brady likes your book. Isn't that similar to your own mom, though, kind of?
That's awesome. That is like having your mother read the book twice. your actual mother and then America's mother.
Who doesn't like Miss Brady?
Having that in mind, we all want to be surprised by having Mrs. Brady read our book. So we're going to move ahead and assume that people who are listening still want to publish, whether it's self-publishing or traditional. We're not going to spend too much time on traditional publishing because that effectively just comes down to look up a publishing house you respect, one that you read, and then you write a query letter, tell them what you've written, and then they will get back to you. And there are lots of books on how to write query letters. There are lots of books on how to submit books. So
it's like applying to a college. There's stuff to it you have to do.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And there are people willing to prep that for you and books to guide you through that process. So
because if you don't, it'll get thrown right in the trash can.
Exactly. Yeah, you really do. Like down to the font. If you don't follow the proper formatting. So we're gonna not get into that. We will get into instead the pitfalls of publishing, things that you should be avoiding while you are going down the publishing road. So the first one I want to get into is one that I have fallen into. These are things scam publishers do. And you can find this from, we're going to link off in our blog article. We'll have links to each of these. And I suggest looking up these articles. They're really good. The first one is scam publishers will sometimes charge reading fees. Did you ever have anybody charge you a reading fee?
I didn't, but I know what it is because they kind of hook you and tell you how much they love your book and that they see real potential. Yes,
they flatter you, and they include a lot of flowery language to tell you that it's going to be a hit. That they're looking at something good here, but they just need a little bit of money because it's their time. Their time is valuable, and they want you to pay for it.
And you said that you've paid reading fees?
I've paid contest fees, and they call them reading fees. And later on, I read that is also a scam. That whether it's publishing or contests, if they're charging a fee to read your stuff, that means they don't expect to sell it. That when they finally publish it, they don't think it's going to make anything, and they're not planning to sell it. They're not going to promote it.
Time then,
right? So you are actually literally paying for their time to read what they consider probably something unsellable. You can kind of spot these people because they will also include a lot of in-process charges. So like the sunk cost fallacy, like as you start putting money into your publishing with them, they'll keep charging you. They'll charge you for like, bookkeeping fees and more reading fees and fees to like do some minor editing and tinkering.
This sounds like it should be against the law.
It should be. It's because they get people to sign contracts and things that some people don't catch on that quickly. They will also sometimes charge you royalties. So you know how you're supposed to make money.
You're supposed to get the royalties.
You're supposed to get the royalties.
Yeah.
Some of these publishing companies that are shady, they will actually take a portion of your royalties. They'll say, we'll publish you, but we want X amount.
Now, I've been scammed in this business, and you think, I would never fall for that. But they baby step you into it.
They absolutely do, yeah. So if you're going through a self-publisher that wants a portion of royalties, start looking into them. A lot of these companies that are doing these shady practices, they operate behind an online wall, meaning they have a website, but they don't have an internet presence. They are faceless. They don't have an agent. You're usually not going to talk to somebody except maybe over the phone. So that's a big red warning sign. It doesn't necessarily mean the self-publisher you're looking at is a scam, but it is an indicator. We mentioned publishers can flatter you, and if you've written a book that you're attached to, like you're in love with your words, you have a finished manuscript, and it's big, like it's the biggest thing in your life at that moment. When a publisher flatters you, that can be intoxicating. That can make it really tough to walk away from a publisher when somebody is like, hey, I've got something, and somebody else believes in it.
Especially if you're green to the business. If you're new, you're going to believe that. You're an accomplished writer, but how good was your early stuff?
Terrible.
But you thought it was.
Oh, at the time, it was golden. Like, I absolutely believed in it 100%. Yeah. There's
so you're more vulnerable in the beginning.
Completely. You're vulnerable all the way through because whatever you're working on in the moment feels fantastic. But especially at the beginning, if a self-publisher had told me I could make a ton of money if I just go through their publishing steps, I would have done it. I would have fallen for it 100%. There's a New York Times best-selling fantasy writer, Brandon Sanderson. He teaches a class at Brigham Young University, and he talks about how lots of agents wanted to represent his first book when he had it ready and finished and in his hand. Lots of agents came to him and said, "Let me publish it. It's going to sell." He said only one agent came to him and said, "I want to sell your future books. This is interesting, but I want to sell the ones you write after this too." And that's the one he went with. So lots of these publishers who are not on the up and up, they will talk about selling what you have now and making it a hit. But you want somebody who is going to be looking at working with you in the future. If you're going to go with traditional publishing, the part we talked about at the beginning of the show, where we talked editors and quote-unquote gatekeepers. Gatekeeping in publishing is a term people use for anyone that's going to look at your book and judge it for its merits on how it's technically written. Self-publishing sidesteps this. The self-publishing saves your dignity. It means no one ever tells you no. But in traditional publishing, you will have an editor who will look through your book, who will wait weeks or months or possibly up to a year without responding to you. And when they finally respond, it will probably be a Stephen King style rejection where it just says, "Thank you for submitting, but we're not interested at this time." That is slowly, it's intimidating. That's tough to take.
Okay, Joe, let's go back up here a bit. I want to ask you a question about that BYU author professor.
Yeah, Sanderson.
Do you think the reason the agent was talking about what's continuing what he's going to do next is because they're looking for how much content you can pump out regular. They want to know how much you write every day. If you write once a month, once a year, or if you write 3,000 words a day.
That is a very good point. A lot of people who are approaching publishing for the first time, they're approaching with a book they've been tinkering on for years and years and years. Whereas Sanderson is notably, like he is known for putting out lots and lots of words very, very fast. So that publishers saw that he could be basically a factory for stories. Whereas a lot of us, the rest of us, I'd say the majority of us are going to come out with a book, and it's going to be the book of our life. We made it once, and we finally got our book out. So
which is less attractive too.
It is. Yeah, agents don't want to invest in you if you're only ever going to put out one book. They want to pair up with you if you are going to be putting out material your whole life.
How many words do you write a day so I can judge you?
I write a couple thousand a day.
Every day?
I do, yes. What was it? I'm trying to think. The Tao of Writing. Lots of sources say at least 1,000 words a day. I do minimum is I usually do hours, because sometimes I am writing things that are very technical or require a lot of outlining. So I don't consider outlining part of my word count. So I will usually do 2,000 to 5,000.
Wow. And including once a week the re-engineered you script.
And re-engineered you on top of that. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
And speech writing probably about once or twice a week too.
And speech writing, yes. If we include both of those, it far exceeds that number. But when it comes to short fiction, I try to do 2,000 to 5,000 a day.
Impressive.
So this is going to be, I'm going to quote from Times Higher Education, which is one of the article sources we have here. A guy named Martin McQuillan said, and just generally about publishing, walk away from anyone who asks you for money to publish your book. In asterisk, I'll say this is for anyone who's not self-publishing. He says, if you believe in your material, take it seriously and treat it well. They should be looking at your content, not your wallet. And that is for traditional publishers. If you're going through a gatekeeper, they are going to use your material to make sales. They are not going to use you as a sale. If you go traditional publishing, take your time to find an editor, find one who's worked on other great books. I mean, like literally turn over a book cover and look at the jacket and see who published it. See who edited it, who was the agent. All that stuff is listed, and you can find good sources by doing that. Just look through your favorite books. And finally, I would recommend for anyone who is considering testing the waters out with short fiction, you can look up magazine shorts and see what is open. There are two sources. Duotrope and Grindr are resources online, and they show you the market. So if you log in, make an account, one is paid, one is not. Duotrope has a $50 subscription, I believe. Grindr has no subscription fee. You go there, and it will show you week by week when you enter in your name and information what markets are open. You just write in the genre of what you've written, and it will say, hey, here are people who are taking submissions. Here are editors, actual real magazine editors who are looking for new stuff. Just as a good example of this, David Sedaris is a humor writer who has multiple books out. He started with New Yorker articles. He wrote 40 articles for the New Yorker. And in that time, he slowly collected together comedy books, and now he's a major bestseller. So do not be afraid to cut your teeth on small things. Go after magazines. Get rejected by smaller editors first before you go after a big novel.
And build that big portfolio.
Exactly.
And those daily reps like Joe has, 2,000 to 5,000 words.
Get that portfolio going, get that experience in. Don't be afraid to take the slow path. It really, really is rewarding.
I read somewhere we get better when we do things more. Is that true?
I think it might be. Maybe we'll do an episode about that someday.
We get better at the things we work on.
So, speaking of warning signs in publishing, when did you know that your self-published book was not going to take off the way you had thought?
Well, first, like I started in the beginning, my first love, and going to Toastmasters, I absolutely fell in love with public speaking. I loved getting up there. I loved how I got all excited and nervous. And I really enjoyed being a guest on podcasts. So even though the book didn't really work out, I found those two things. I think the book, I just gave up. I spent so much money and time promoting, I think I just ran out of gas.
Okay.
And maybe I didn't believe in my book, or I didn't believe in myself enough. And I really thought it would be a lot easier. Kind of like what you said, you just kind of put it out there and millions of people buy it. And
Right.
Writing is one job, okay? Promoting the book is like 2 full-time jobs.
I totally see that. When people, authors tell me what they've done to promote their books, it sounds tiresome. I physically get tired listening to them talk about it. Like, I've heard real writers, like really big names. I won't name call them, but I've heard them talk about when they started that they would like have their own. They would carry crates in the back of their car with their own books. Actually, Brandon Sanderson from BYU, he talked about how he went and he shared. He went on tour with another major writer. I think it was David Farland. And they paired up and they just like toured across the country in a small car and shared hotel rooms and stuff. So
slept in the car.
The biggest name people in publishing right now have had to do sick amounts of promotion.
And I think the key to that one is they had an awesome book to promote.
Yes.
I think online now on YouTube and stuff, they make it sound like you just promote Joe Anthony, you just promote Todd Laments, and you're going to get so successful if you just promote. It's like you also have to have something good to stand on.
Yes. You can promote as much as you want, and you will get attention, and you will get a small amount of money. But even with having solid gold in a briefcase ready to put in front of people's faces, you still need to promote the hell out of it.
Now, I need to say this. I have nothing but love and respect for all authors. And the reason I do, and this means authors who don't sell a single book, and this means people who sell 10 million, it is a very vulnerable thing. Especially, writing your book, putting your story out there, nonfiction, fiction, it doesn't matter. It opens you up to a lot of criticism.
Absolutely.
How have you dealt with the criticism part?
Badly.
Can you elaborate?
So I want to talk about...
Get granular with your answer, please.
I will be granular, yes. I wrote an article called Obi-Wan Was a Killing Machine. And it was about how the character from Star Wars in the background had like quietly dealt with all the sand people on the desert planet during retirement. Somebody online... So it got picked up and published by another website that's no longer around called Movie Pilot. And when they published it, it was really popular. People liked it and read it. Except, did you know that Star Wars fans are very protective of their stories?
I was going to say, that's very thin ice. Would you calling out Star Wars something you noticed that was off?
There was no ice. I might as well have dove into a lake. It was bad. I was negative comments. People followed me online to give me negative comments. I was dragged.
So there's some guy in a Spock suit. I think this is where this is going.
Being beaten up by a Wookiee in a parking lot. No, I dealt with it poorly. Somebody, my favorite comment, I actually saved a screen cap of this in a comment section, said, "Nice try, kid. A lot of words wasted on nothing." Here's how invested I was in what I'd written. I wrote back, I posted a picture of a fake book cover. And I said, "Thanks, you've named my autobiography." And it was A Lot of Words Wasted on Nothing by Joe Anthony. And it had like a dead tree in a desert. Like that was the cover.
How much time did that take you to put that together?
It took him 10 seconds to write that comment. It took me 30 minutes to respond. And that was 30 minutes I could have spent writing my next book. It was terrible. And
you didn't sleep for a week because you were so pissed off.
That's right. I'm still not sleeping today. Like it's lasted for years.
Well, I remember like it was yesterday, talk about being vulnerable. I remember being mocked by my coworkers and some family members that I wasn't smart enough to write a book and that what would I have to say anyways? And that hurt my feelings.
So they mocked you before it even came out?
While it was out, the whole time. They still do.
All the time, yeah.
I don't talk about it anymore. I do want to talk about this. another option for people who have a great story to tell is ghostwriting. A lot of people in nonfiction, like I heard of some statistics, like 70-80% of them are ghostwritten.
I fully believe that.
Now, what a ghostwriter is I go to them with my story. They're a professional writer. I know my story. And they take it and they make it, they present it the best. What do you think about ghostwriting?
I like it. I mean, I have met so many people at writers' clubs that want to write a memoir, and they put so much time into it that they may as well have paid a ghostwriter. Like the amount of time investment. If they had just gone and like literally looked for loose change on the sidewalk, they would have made all that money back in the amount of time it took them to learn how to write their own memoir.
Because they do it all the time. If they write 2,000 to 5,000 words a day or a week or whatever, they're going to be better than you, who's not a professional writer. And your book's going to come out something you can follow, read, good structure.
Right. So I totally think ghostwriters are worth it if you're looking to get a memoir out.
And there's a lot of presidents who all have biographies done by professional writers, their stories. They didn't write those. They hire, and some of the ghostwriters make as much as $50K a book.
We like to call those writers sellouts, except for they can't hear us in their tall mansions.
Everyone, I think, has a bestseller in them, either something they've accomplished or something they've survived. And as far as traditional publishing or self-publishing, I really do believe trying is winning.
I think that's a really good message. I was going to ask you, how important is it for the author to have one really good story in his body of work? Have you ever read somebody where they have one amazing story and the rest are just sort of like forgettable?
Yeah, they open up. They all do. I think a narrative is everything. It's imperative to something. And you'll notice this, all the books you've read, and I'm a big nonfiction reader because, like you said, I'm a documentary geek, biographies. What will you remember? You're going to remember one story from that book. And you'll tell everybody, I read this book, it's awesome. Even that Stephen King book, that's the only one I remember is that Carrie thing. And I probably read that book 6 times. That's how powerful it is. You save that.
Yeah.
That story.
You remember that one big one, and you just sort of follow them. There's one of the pieces of advice that kept coming up over and over again online while researching this, and generally for myself too while looking into publishing. They say it's really important if you are actually going to take the time to get good at writing, even if you're ghost writing and your name doesn't technically appear on what you're doing, you want to get a consistent grouping. So like people that go target shooting, like for bows and guns or whatever, they call the grouping, that's, how you don't want to hit one bullseye once. You want to hit a bullseye every once in a while, and then a couple of shots make it close to the middle of the target, that kind of thing.
It's better to be consistent than a one-hit wonder.
I have seen this in writing, where you'll encounter an author and they have one really amazing book, and the rest are absolute garbage. Writers can do that too. Like small contests can do that. I encounter a lot of short story writers where they have one really good one, and the rest are just sort of meh.
There's nothing more disappointing than a bad book.
Yeah.
You just like, what the, especially from you have high expectations when you've already read 3 of their books.
Exactly. Yeah. I've encountered that a lot in reading. So what we're basically advocating here is, everybody likes to sort of walk around with a book in their head, and they eventually write it, and they spend a lot of care and time on that one book, and they're hoping that's their bullseye, and they don't give much thought to the next one or the grouping or the next short they work on. So if you approach writing your book and you're going to publish it, think about the next one. Think about honing your skills as you go, so that you don't just have the one bullseye, so that you are ready to shoot another one after.
And if that 4th book sells as a New York Times bestseller, guess what? The first one, the second one, and the third one are all going to sell too. Exactly. They will come back to life.
Absolutely. We brought up Dan Brown earlier. He wrote Angels and Demons and The Da Vinci Code. He had several books out already. People didn't know about that until they read Da Vinci Code. They went back and read his other ones because he had a good grouping.
Devour all his content.
Exactly. Well, now we are going to get to for my money, the most practical part of our show today. What actually sells? Because we started the show by saying selling is hard, publishing is difficult, not a lot is selling on hardback anymore. So we really want to get into what genre sells, statistically, what are people reading, what are people into, and if you write something, what's the one that will probably get picked up and published. So, Todd, what would you guess is the biggest selling genre right now? Like, what do you think, like, you could write it and it would probably sell in hard books, like an actual physical book?
What is that? Well, the book that I hear everyone talking about and I see in displays everywhere is it 50 Shades of Grey.
Absolutely. So, like, erotica and romance do sell, but weirdly, not a lot in hard books. Most of those are consumed. Okay, so if you're sitting on the train and you're reading say a steamy romance book, if you have the big physical copy of a book with a dust jacket that has like the title on the front,
them holding each other, the guy with the long Fabio hair.
Fabio is sweeping somebody off their feet. That's not as that's a little conspicuous. So the hard books, the ones that people actually carry around, I think it's a brag. I think people have these so the titles are out so people can see that you're smart and you're reading it. That
you're worldly, that you know about politics, and right?
Exactly. The top-selling genre of book is memoirs and biographies come in #1.
Really? Memoirs, I think, is someone writes about their own family and nobody cares kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that this is almost entirely memoirs and biographies of people who are already wealthy, rich, or famous. So these are like when Barack Obama put out Hope.
Exactly. Bill Clinton. Yeah.
Exactly. Tell-alls that are titillating and interesting. Second, coming in at second is self-help.
Right on.
Right on.
Our next book's going to be self-helpy.
Yeah, we know that genre. We read that genre. The next one is religion and spirituality.
Joel Osteen.
Mm-hmm. Joel Osteen.
Sells a lot of books, man.
And it does feel self-helpy, too, when you read those books. There are some that are both, like the book Boundaries. It is both, self-help and religion. So
yeah, if he didn't say Jesus every once in a while, we'd think that was just Joel Osteen was just self-help.
Right. Yeah, you can blend genres too. So when we're reading these genres and saying this is what sells, you can take two and put them in a blender. Fourth down, so like the fourth biggest selling genre in hard books is health, fitness, and dieting. And
not shocking there. We all want to be thinner and sexier, right?
Right. There's a trend here. A lot of these are reading about other people and helping ourselves in physical, religious, and spiritual senses.
That's a good point.
And then the final one is politics and social science. So if you're on a train and you're carrying a hard book and you have the title out, it makes sense that you'd want people to be like, oh, that guy knows politics. So ebooks, the biggest genres in ebooks. We're not going to spend too much time on this because it basically repeats our last list with a couple of additions. #1 in ebooks is religion and spirituality. #2 is biographies and memoirs. #3 is business and money. So that to me is interesting that business and money did not hit the hard book toppers, but people are reading it more in ebook. #4 is self-help. And then #5, because apparently ebook people are into high living, I guess, is cookbooks, food, and vine. So those are the top genres for hard books and ebooks. Now we get into 50 Shades of Grey. Now we get into the subgenres. And for these, we actually have the money made by each genre. I think this is according to last year. Now, a subgenre, by the way, we usually use the catch-all term genres. Technically, a subgenre is novels and like we're talking mystery and romance and like sci-fi and fantasy and things. So these we're getting away from the educational or the life stuff, the nonfiction.
Let me stop you there, Joe. For these writers who want to be writers, this is the part where If they say a dollar amount, Joe says a dollar amount, you say, I will just take 5 million of that and I'll be happy.
Right.
So you carve out your piece of the pie. This is where you do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you want to know what sells well, and you will, based on the market, you may want to make your decision now on what you want to go after. So these subgenres by popularity and by the amount they made. Romance and erotica. Here we go. 50 Shades of Grey, Todd. It made 1.44 billion last year.
Holy
and that's
cow.
the number one subgenre.
A billion is 1,000 million, and there's 4 though. That's a lot.
So again, 1.4 billion. Crime and mystery. So I've got a couple of those books lying around. Those are the crime and mystery novels, the whodunits.
I used to read as a kid Agatha Christie.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but you think that's pretty dry for a kid, you know what I mean?
It is an interesting choice. Young Todd reading Agatha Christie. Were you planning something?
Trying to kill my parents.
Crime and mystery is the number 2 most read genre, and that comes in at 728 million. Number 3, religious and inspirational. So we're talking like those Christian novels that are like, the end times are coming. Some of those can be fun. That's 720 million. Science fiction and fantasy books. Here's Heinlein, Asimov. Also get into a little bit of Robert Jordan, George R. Martin, Game of Thrones. So sci-fi and fantasy is 590 million. I would have thought it would placed higher, but that makes sense as a genre. 5th on the list is children and young adult. That comes in at 160 million. So now I do want to make something kind of clear. Science fiction and fantasy get sold to schools all the time. So you can have an adult book that plays into the children and young adult market and vice versa. So those two cross genres quite a lot. And then finally, number 6, we're getting back to Stephen King where we started. Horror at 79 million.
So that's not a big one.
Not a big one at all.
He dominates that.
Compare romance and erotica, 1.4 billion, to horror, which is a 79 million dollar market. So,
and for you fiction writers out there, this is not including if you get a Netflix deal, a Hulu deal, or a movie deal.
Right. Yeah.
Because then you will make $1 million.
Exactly.
Really quick.
We are purely talking about book marketing and revenue from books. So to recap, and this comes from 2 book marketing articles we're going to post, revenue from this industry in the U.S. is projected to reach about $44 billion in 2020, which is an increase. We talked about how the book market was shrinking. However, that was in print. We are now talking about digital books and audiobooks. So if you look at the total book market in general, the way the market is expanding while bookstores are shutting their doors, it's all audiobooks, baby. People want to listen to their books, and they want to get ebooks for it sometimes if they want to read on the bus.
I can see all of that long commute. If you do that every day, let's say you live in Southern California, you put an audio book in, you read a book a day. You'll get smarter.
Oh, absolutely. I totally believe that audiobooks are kind of the genre that is pulling ahead, and I think people used to look down on it. I think it wasn't a real book that you were reading if it was audio, but
absolutely,
I think that has changed.
Yeah, and you'll get your favorite voiceover actors too. So when they read the book, it just sounds richer.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to circle back to something Stephen King said in his book about writing.
Okay.
And this is going to sound very elementary school, but this is very important. Only write what you love. And write what you read. If you read horror, don't try to write exotica. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I
know
people
running to sell a certain amount of book, and that's just not going to work.
Yeah. I know we just went down that list, and I said, here's what's selling. And I almost said it like, if you want to make sales, do that genre. But Todd's right. You really should just write the one you love the most.
Now, Joe, this is interesting. This is something I've just, from working with you. You're a fantasy writer. That's your love.
Yeah, fantasy and sci-fi.
Joe reads everything. So he talks about writing 5,000 words a day. He reads all the time. He's always reading. So he's not putting that into how much time he spends. And that helps you writing, right?
It 100%.
Now explain this to me. You're a fantasy writer, and you love science. Can you tell people how much research goes into a fantasy book? How much science you have to know, how much research you have to do?
Oh, so there is people online sort of throw around the idea that you have to read 10 times the amount that you write or something like that. I think a more accurate way to say it is you have to study things that interest you. That way you can write things that are fantastical about it. Frank Herbert, the man who wrote Dune, he wrote about fantastic fantasy desert planet where, you know, magic spice made people's eyes glow and gave them superpowers. In real life, he was actually studying how desertification works and how plants interact with sand and things like that. So he was really in the nitty-gritty of the research for professionally to do it. A lot of the best fantasy authors are historians. They just love history.
I've read some of Joe's stuff, and he'll be researching. If he's doing a book from a story from the 1700s, he will research what kind of weaponry they had, what kind of poisons they had, what the poison was made out of, the local flowers.
Right. You do have to be a voracious reader to write in a genre. Or if you're Stephen King or David Sedaris, you have to love what you're into, even if it is just normal life. You have to ask a lot of questions, even if you're not going to do, detailed research.
If you're ever at a cocktail party and your best friend is toting his or her new novel, there's no need to run home and write your own yet. Before you begin picking out cover art and who you're going to thank on the inside page, there are a few things to bear in mind. Book sales, especially books sold in traditional brick-and-mortar stores, are shrinking. And less than 1% of published books ever hit those shelves anyway. New titles, even those by established authors, are getting harder and harder to sell. And the authors who do make sales end up selling to their own online communities without nearly as much help or marketing from the publishers. In all likelihood, your braggart friend who's holding up his new book had it self-published. If that's the case, he might have gotten scammed, swindled by reading and processing fees, and flattered by publishers who told him his memoir about being a boring middle manager was a guaranteed bestseller. In reality, if you choose to publish your book, do it for the love of writing, because you believe to your marrow in the message you're putting out into the world. Don't be afraid to try traditional gatekeepers like editors. Take your time, find your market, and when your big hit is finally released, you can tell your friends they won't find it in stores or collecting dust on your shelf. They'll find it on their phone, in an audiobook, ready for them to listen during their morning commute. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
Connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com, where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.